I never thought my own wedding day would end with my sister being escorted out in handcuffs while 300 guests watched in stunned silence, but looking back at the wreckage of my $80,000 dream wedding, I realized the fuse was lit years ago. My sister, Chloe, always had to be the center of attention, but I never imagined she would reach a level of malice that involved drugging the bride just to steal the spotlight. I'm sitting here now, staring at my wedding photos and wondering if I was the villain for how I handled it, or if I simply gave her the stage she so desperately craved. Before I get into the gritty details of how I turned her ultimate betrayal into her public downfall, I have to ask you, if you caught someone poisoning your drink on the happiest day of your life, would you stop them quietly, or would you let them finish their plan just so everyone could see who they really are? Tell me if I went too far, because by the time the cake was cut, there wasn't a single person in that ballroom who didn't know exactly what kind of monster my sister is. To understand why Chloe did what she did, you have to understand our dynamic. I'm the responsible one, the one who worked 2 jobs through college, saved every penny, and eventually built a career in high-end real estate that allowed me to afford the wedding of my dreams. Chloe is 3 years younger and has spent her entire life being the troubled one. My parents always enabled her, coddling her through every failed job and every emergency that required a bailout. When I got engaged to Mark, a man who is as kind as he is successful, Chloe's jealousy didn't just simmer, it boiled over. She spent the entire 18 months of our engagement making snide remarks about the cost of the venue, the designer dress, and the fact that we were having a black-tie affair. She told everyone who would listen that I was showing off, and that I had forgotten where I came from. The truth was, I just wanted one day where things were perfect, but for Chloe, my perfection was an insult to her chaos. The morning of the wedding was a whirlwind of hairspray, champagne, and nervous energy. I had spent $80,000 to ensure every detail was flawless, from the 10-foot floral walls to the 5-course meal. Chloe was a bridesmaid, a decision I made only to keep the peace with my mother, but she was a dark cloud from the moment she walked into the bridal suite. She complained about the color of the silk robes. She intentionally arrived late for makeup, and she kept making comments about how it must be nice to have so much money to throw away. I tried to ignore her. I was focused on Mark and the life we were starting. But as the day progressed, I noticed Chloe whispering to her boyfriend, a guy she'd been dating for 2 months who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I saw her eyeing the bar, and I saw her hovering around my personal vanity more than once. I figured she was just looking for a way to make the day about her drama, but I never expected she'd go after my physical safety. The ceremony was beautiful. Walking down that aisle, seeing Mark's face, I felt like everything I'd worked for had finally culminated in this moment. We swapped vows, we kissed, and we walked out to a shower of white rose petals. But the shift happened during the cocktail hour. I was exhausted and thirsty, and I had a specific glass of sparkling cider, since I don't drink alcohol, set aside for me at the head table. As we were being introduced as Mr. and Mrs., for the first time, I saw Chloe leaning over the head table. She didn't see me watching through the cracked door of the bridal staging area. I saw her pull a small vial from her clutch, unscrew the cap, and pour a clear liquid into my glass. She stirred it with her finger, wiped her hand on her dress, and then walked away with a smirk that I can only describe as demonic. My heart dropped into my stomach. My own sister had just spiked my drink at my wedding. I didn't drink it, obviously. I swapped my glass with a fresh one from the server the second I sat down, but I kept the poisoned, glass hidden under the table in a spare chilled bucket. I spent the next hour in a state of cold, calculated fury. I realized that if I confronted her then, she'd lie, my parents would defend her, and the wedding would be ruined anyway. But then I saw her checking her watch, looking at me with this expectant, ghoulish grin, waiting for me to pass out or start acting crazy in front of Mark's high society family and my bosses. She wanted me to humiliate myself. That's when I decided that if she wanted a show, I was going to give her one, but she'd be the star of the tragedy, not me. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting at my $80,000 reception, staring at a glass of liquid that my sister intended to use to ruin my life, while she sat 10 feet away waiting for the fun to start. I realized I had two choices. I could call the police right then and end the party, or I could play her game and turn the tables in the most public way possible. Before I tell you how I handled the toast and the police, I want you to pause and comment below. What would you have done? Would you have protected the sanctity of the wedding and handled it privately later? Or would you have chosen violence, metaphorically speaking? I really want to know if you think I'm a monster for what I did next. I waited until it was time for the speeches. Chloe had been nagging me for weeks to let her give a toast, even though I knew she'd probably just use it to talk about herself. I had originally told her no, but now I saw my opportunity. I stood up, took the microphone, and looked out at the 300 guests, Mark's colleagues, our extended family, our friends. I said, before my maid of honor speaks, I want to invite my sister, Chloe, up here. She's been so eager to share some words, and I think today is the perfect day for total honesty. Chloe looked shocked, then smug. She practically ran to the stage, grabbing a glass of champagne on the way. But before she could speak, I held up the glass she had spiked. I told the room, wait, Chloe, before you start, I want us to have a special sisterly bond. You see, I saw how much care you put into preparing a drink for me earlier. I saw you add that special ingredient when you thought I wasn't looking. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Chloe's face turned a shade of white I've never seen on a living person. I continued. I was curious what it was, so while everyone was eating their salads, I had my wedding coordinator, who happens to be a former nurse, take a quick look. It turns out my sister decided I needed a heavy dose of high-strength sedatives today. I guess she thought the bride was a little too stressed. The gasps from the audience were like a physical wave. My mother stood up, trying to shush me, but I didn't stop. I looked Chloe dead in the eyes and said, I didn't drink it, Chloe, but I did call the police 10 minutes ago, and since I have the vial you dropped under the table and the footage from the venue's security cameras which clearly shows you tampering with my glass, I think your toast is going to have to wait for your lawyer. Right on cue, 2 officers appeared at the ballroom entrance. I had told them to wait for my signal because I wanted every single person in that room to see her for who she was. Chloe tried to run, which only made her look more guilty, but she tripped over her own bridesmaid dress and ended up sobbing on the floor as they handcuffed her. My parents were screaming at me, calling me heartless for trapping her, but Mark stood by my side, his arm firmly around my waist. He told my parents that if they said one more word, they could join her in the back of the squad car for being accessories. The rest of the night was a blur. Half the guests were in shock, the other half were cheering. We didn't end the party. I told the DJ to play the loudest, happiest song he had, and we danced the night away while my sister was processed at the local precinct for reckless endangerment and tampering with a consumer product. In the weeks since, my family has completely split. My parents haven't spoken to me, claiming I ruined Chloe's life over a prank. A prank. She tried to drug me at my own wedding, and they called it a prank. But Mark's family and all our friends have been incredibly supportive. Chloe is facing actual charges, and I'm not dropping them. I spent $80,000 on a wedding, and while it didn't go the way I planned, I consider that money well spent for the clarity it gave me. I lost a sister, but I realized I never really had one to begin with. I learned that you can't fix people who are determined to break you, and sometimes the best way to handle a snake is to let everyone see it bite. I know some people think I was cruel for doing it so publicly, but I felt like I had spent my whole life protecting her from the consequences of her actions, and all it did was lead her to believe she could poison me without an issue. Was I wrong to turn my wedding into a crime scene, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Like this video if you think Chloe got what was coming to her, and subscribe for more stories about people finally getting their karma. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'm reading all of them to see if I should feel guilty, though honestly, I've never slept better. I'll see you all in the next story.